I rarely use the word advocate or advocacy these days. That's my confession for the start of what I'm talking about. And if you've read the blurb about me at the beginning in your brochure, I just read it so I could check who I was. You'll see that there's loads of stuff about how I was part of the advocacy movement and how I wrote this and I led that. And I genuinely don't use the word very often. And so I guess that's why my talk this afternoon is framed around this idea of communities and what the long-term solution is, because I find that that's what I'm interested in. The other half of my confession is that I recently absolutely and categorically refused an advocate for my daughter. So 2 bits, which hopefully will unfold a little bit. So, be a force for change. I can part of some of the stuff that I do around the country is around change management, and anybody who brings me to and talk about anything, I can never resist talking about change. I can never resist a reference to Mac, Apple Mac. I'm a bit of a Mac freak. My house is a PC-free zone. I started opening up this and going, oh, what do I do? I just love this quote, and I kind of think it sums up what we're here to do. Here's to the crazy ones, the misfits, the rebels, the troublemakers, the round pegs in the square holes, the ones who see things differently. They're not fond of rules, and they have no respect for the status quo. You can quote them, disagree with them, glory or vilify them. About the only thing you can't do is ignore them, because they change things. They push the human race forward. And while some may see them as the crazy ones, we see genius. Because the people who are crazy enough to think they can change the world are the ones who do. And I kind of think, yeah, isn't that great? Ain't Apple Mac great? So that's a kind of an excuse for one of my favourite quotes, and just a kind of another call to action. And just to stay thinking about change for a second, what we do know about it is that we don't like it very much. The idea of change ahead, symbolised by that yellow warning sign, that's the American yellow warning sign, we would have it, of course, with the red round the edge, is that, yeah, human beings, generally speaking, are not designed to change. We like things the way we are. That's how we want to stay. It's pretty difficult. It's difficult to change doing things the way you're used to. It's afternoon. We've had lots to eat and drink. Some of you are already sitting with your arms folded. I can see you. I'm really sorry. It's okay. No, it's good. Fold your arms. Go on, everybody, fold your arms for me. Come on, properly fold your arms. Okay. Come on, everybody. Right. Now fold them the other way. Oh, how does that work then? Okay, yeah, brilliant. I could capture your facial expression. It was great. Oh, and where does that go? Yeah. That's change, isn't it? Essentially, what we're asking people to do is to learn how to fold their arms the wrong way round. And the only way to do that is to keep on doing it and doing it and doing it. And sometimes you might be in a situation where you've hurt your finger and you can't comfortably fold your arms that way, so you might have to do it differently. But generally speaking, it's a pretty hard thing to do. And the other thing we know about change is that it's messy. Anybody who knows anything about change management will know about the day of the dark souls. That thing where you're making a change and you're trying to get through it and you're working hard, and you get to that point where it all just goes really difficult and really, really messy, the day of the dark souls. And the best analogy I can think of that is that if you want to have a butterfly come from a caterpillar, there must be some darn messy stuff that goes on in that cocoon. That's all I can say. Yeah? You just have to live with it and accept it and stick with it. And sometimes when we're going through a process of change, sticking with the messy stuff is really, really important. And I guess today, listening, it's lovely being the last person to speak, because you do get to reflect on what other people have said. And it does feel like, even if I'm not using the word advocacy or advocate very much, we're at a place where we're a bit of a day of the dark souls, I think, in our world. And we're also thinking about how we move through that. And there's something about the day of the dark souls, if you stop at cocoon stage, there is nowhere to go, you'll die. You have to push through that mess, and then the butterfly comes out. So something for us, I think, about pushing through that tough stuff and coming out of the cocoon and new butterflies being formed. Okay, that's the end of my self-indulgence about change. On to the important stuff. Last thing, very importantly. I think that the biggest thing about change is about choosing the right problem. And I'll come back to that during the course of this afternoon. You can see from the image there, if that man might do a phenomenally good job of doing those, cutting through those bricks with his karate chop, but is in danger of having the wall fall on his head. Here's the question: what's the meaning of life? I've a suggestion there. The two rabbits sitting there. What's the meaning of life? I like carrots. Okay, that could be where you go with it. I want you to think about the things that you really wouldn't want to be without in your life. Okay, we kind of feel in that age, it feels like at the moment it's all about cuts, isn't it? All the stuff you're going to have to lose. Okay, I'm asking you to think about what you're going to save. Okay, I'm going to be kind. I'm taking care of Maslow's bottom layer. You have shelter, you have clothes, you're not naked, you're not cold, and you're not hungry. Okay, basic stuff's taken care of. Given that, what would be the 3 things that you wouldn't want to be without? They can be physical, they can be conceptual, they can be anything you like. You have approximately 30 seconds to think about them, and write them down on your sheet of paper, please. Okay, who's got 3? Got 3? Do you need 10 more seconds? Okay, right. Somebody offer me their first one.
Sense of humour.
Sense of humour would be the first thing. Anybody else got that one? Oh, a couple, okay. There's not a huge demand for that, but there's a few, okay. What have you got?
Health.
Health? Anybody else got health? Okay, yeah, few. There's more for health than sense of humour, okay. Somebody else? Family, okay. Anybody have family or some version of family? Oh, hey, listen, we're getting there. Who else had something that was like family?
No.
Social interaction. Brilliant, excellent. Love, someone said love. Dogs. Excellent. Friends, okay. So you're talking about people love social interaction. I love that. You've been an advocate there for too long. I'm sorry. Do you go to the pub on a Friday night and have social interaction? Excellent. Sometimes on a Saturday too. So I'm not sure actually if it's appropriate to have 2 social interactions in a week. I know you might want to check that out. Okay, brilliant. Okay, somebody else, something different. Choice, freedom. That was quite similar. Anybody got anything like that? Choice, freedom, control. Freedom of expression, respect, right at the back. Speak freely, okay. Lots of hands went up there for those of you at the front, lots of people saying that. Okay, anything different? Memory, okay. To feel valued, okay. Yeah, absolutely, okay. Challenges, okay, that's an interesting one, yeah. Just that sense of something else to get my teeth into. Something worth living for, okay? Go ahead.
Socialist tradition.
The socialist tradition. Fantastic. Okay, that's brilliant. Okay, we could keep on doing this, but I'd make you late for your trains home. So, generally speaking, there are some things that you in the room, if you are the sample population of the meaning of life, we've got some agreement on, yeah? That's great. I apologise to those of you, this is a very well-used slide, and as clever and as important as Simon Duffy is, he isn't the meaning of life. This is the Keys to Citizenship graphic, which many of you will be familiar with. And it's just that idea of these are the kind of things that make human beings who we are. They make life worth living. Maybe it's not as strong as the meaning of life, but they certainly do make life worth living. And funnily enough, you agreed. So we talked about support, people who, it doesn't say paid support there, it says it's about people. The kind of things that we need in our life just to get by from human beings. Self-determination, someone who's almost used that word. Direction, that get up and go, that idea that it isn't just about today, it's about what else there might be. I'm really loving the fact that we finished with a socialist tradition rather than money. Nobody came up with money. Did anybody have money? No, of course not. You're advocates. We're all good Guardian readers. I'm not interested in money in the slightest. No, okay. Yeah, whatever, okay. How are you all getting home? Generally speaking, some disposable income, some means to get the things we need in life are also things that are important. Home's up there. I kind of, to put you off the scent there because I said you had shelter, but I would point out that there is a difference between shelter and home. Who's lived somewhere that was a house but not a home? Yeah. So just important one to mention. And then the other one's community life. So that idea about the ordinary stuff, and again, we're all clearly far too highbrow for that, but community life includes people as well, doesn't it? But it's just the ordinary everyday going about, out and about. You might include work, you might include leisure, all those sorts of things. And the reason I wanted to start with this is because I think that if we go back to the roots of what advocacy is all about, isn't it about making sure that we get this stuff? And haven't services and support without being terribly bad, awful people, done a phenomenally good job of setting things up in a way that don't do these things and actually sometimes do a really good job of not enabling people to have those things. We've got a lot of money in our world being spent on services and support for people that, as we talked this afternoon, that categorically do not enable people to have the things that you said you fundamentally wanted to have and were the meaning of life. So just, and we also, we create services that feel like they tackle problems, that really don't tackle those problems and actually compound them. So some of those things I think of is that, and what is it about a befriending service for people who need friends? If somebody doesn't have any friends, let's help them get some friends. Why do we think, why did my daughter's, why was the solution to my daughter being not listened to, being distressed at school, to have a program of restraint put around her? What's that about? Why do we set up day centres for people who have a lack of purpose and lack of things to do in their life? Why do we set up separate places? Why do we set up places that are away from people's communities that don't support them to have a community life? And there's something about going back to that idea of the wrong solution to the problem. Yeah? So wrong problem, wrong solution. Okay, so this is my time to fess up about why I don't use the word advocacy really much anymore. So talking this afternoon really has made me do some thinking. I'm trying to think when you asked me to do this, Kate. Was it a long time ago? Months? Yeah, I thought so. I've done a lot of thinking about it. I'm quite lucky is that the times I get to talk, I've got quite lazy because I often get to talk about things that I feel quite comfortable talking about and doesn't require me to think much in my preparation. This has required me to think an awful lot. And it's required me to trace back my kind of adulthood, really. I really have gone back to being 18 and think about how my thinking has changed around this advocacy, word advocacy, and the idea of advocacy, and the idea of how we help and support people to get the lives they choose. So in an attempt to make it a little bit more interesting, I've tried to use the journey of my hair colours, okay? Because the few of you in the room who do know me will know that that's something that changes quite a lot. So those are all pictures of me with different hair colours. So I've kind of first pondered the hair colour and what it means. So step one, and we're only starting with adulthood here. I grew up in Berkshire, just down the road from Crowthorne, so about 1.5 miles away from Broadmoor, and about half a mile away from the Ravenswood Foundation, big village community, people familiar, okay? And I didn't realise actually how important that was formatively to me. It was really ordinary for people who I grew up with, because that's what we were used to. The Monday morning Broadmoor siren, absolutely ingrained on who we were. It was just part of it. But there were some interesting things that were folklore around what those two places were about when you're 6 or 7 or 10 or 12 and you don't know what they're like, and your parents are the only people who can frame that for you. And it was very much about the odd people, the different people, the mad people, the bad people, and there was no difference in that labelling between Broadmoor and Ravenswood. They were all, and I genuinely think that was probably because our parents didn't know either. But that was so that was my framing. So as a 15-year-old, and I'm not young, but I'm not that old. I'm only 47. So as a 15-year-old, I worked as a volunteer at Ravenswood for a couple of years, and I was allowed to I worked in with the kids. So they were kids of sometimes only a couple of years younger than me, actually, if I think about it. And I'd take them out. They'd come home to my house, have dinner with me and my family. I sewed a lot at the time. I used to make them clothes. It was amazing, really, thinking about safeguarding and all those rules that we have, that I would be allowed to do that. But I got interested in the world of learning disability. And if I'm completely honest, I got interested in quite a medical model of it. I was very interested in the stuff that was wrong with people. I'm not sure I've ever said that in public before. That drew me to doing my first degree in teaching children with severe learning disabilities. So I did my initial training. I was the last year to go through the specialist training to be a teacher of children with severe learning disabilities up in at Newcastle Poly. And it was characterised that time by, I know what's best, I'll fix them. Short brown, relatively sensible hair, and a cheerleading attitude. Can you imagine me? I do have an element of teacher in me still, I know that. That kind of like, come on everybody, it'll all be fine. Yes, we can make a plan and we'll make it happen. We know what the problem is. I'm the professional, I know what's best. And I had a pretty nice life at that time. I got a good degree. I met a man, I fell in love, I got married. I had a house. We had plenty of money. It was the 80s, mid-80s, late 80s. That was a school I worked in. That's Hare Law Special School. It was one of those schools for children with emotional and behavioural difficulties, naughty boys school, we used to call them. And at that point, it was all about, I don't think I ever thought about the young people I was teaching getting a life. I genuinely know I didn't think about that. I was very focused on their impairments. I was very focused on fixing them. And I completely knew what was best. And had I heard the word advocate? No, never. Ever, ever, ever. Just wasn't part of who I was. And then that kind of quite quickly, there's quite a very short gap. So if that was circa, what did I say? Circa 1989. Short gap to 1993, it became all about rights. Fight to the death. That was because a bunch of stuff that happened. Characterised by long hair, short hair, crew cuts, blonde, red and black hair. Okay, all of the above in that 4-year period. The image there of the building is Kelly Woodley there. What's that image of? Jackie, you would know as well. Can you recognise it? St Nick's. So, St Nicholas Hospital in Newcastle. Section for the first time in 1991. So things went pretty pear-shaped for me. And those sorts of experiences do have a profound effect on how you see the world, don't they? So my own personal experience, I suddenly found myself, having had about a year in hospital, homeless, jobless, single again. It's funny how they don't want you to be a teacher when you're mad, apparently. I don't know. I personally thought it helped a little bit, but no, they don't like it at all. So, and genuinely a bit adrift in knowing what to do. And I had an old tutor from Newcastle Poly, John Swain, who's a very magical guy, who some of you may have read some of his stuff. He's kind of very big in the disability movement. Google him, John Swain, who one day said, do you know what you need to, he arrived at my door in the morning, about 9 o'clock one morning, and said, you need a reason to get up. And I said, I'm not very well. Don't you understand I've got mental health problems? And he said, yeah, and you still need something to do. And there's this great place called Skills for People. And I think they could really use you being a volunteer. So I kind of got involved in Skills for People. And to cut a very long story short, it gave me a real focus for all the things that were going on in my life and how I could also use some of my experiences to help other people. And those of you who don't know Skills for People, it's an advocacy organisation up in Newcastle. run by and for people with learning difficulties, very much a self-advocacy organisation, but also at that time, just going back into the early 90s, just starting to get into the world of representational advocacy. And I became, if you can imagine the image of me with my crew cut, fist raised, I was Ms. Angry Shouty. There was nothing I wouldn't fight. There was no battle I wouldn't take on. No one was safe. And it was a good time, don't get me wrong, there were some really good times about that. I think about some of the phenomenally effective, life-affirming, life-enhancing, supportive self-advocacy that took place. People finding and making connections, people getting a sense of self that they never had before just by that collectivism, being around other people and finding a common fight. Some really, really good professional representational advocacy as people moved from long stay hospital into their own places. And some not so good stuff, if I'm honest, in reflection. I think about the people who came to Skills because that was all they had to do that week. And it was better to be part of a speaking up group, because at least you could sit and drink coffee with people, than just be at home and have nothing else to do. Did they have a fire in their belly to change the world and be politicians? No, they didn't, because not all of us do. It's all right, some of the population don't. They're probably not here today, but there are a bunch of people who are quite happy with the way things are. I still will never forgive myself for John, who I advocated with and for, and I choose my words carefully, whose relationship with his mother I probably completely ruined, because I supported him to speak up about getting his own place against his mother in a way that made her not want to speak to him anymore. Technically, standing by him, enabling him to have his voice, say what he wanted to say, but it was at the expense of his family and the relationships. Just throwing that out there. And I think that it kind of led me on to the next stage that I'll share in a minute, because it felt like at some point we were drifting into that advocacy for advocacy's sake, and it being something you do on a day of the week, and it's unitized and it's measured, and we think about, advocacy, not changing lives and not thinking back to those things that make life worth living. And we also felt like we were doing a good job of making services and support better, not making people's lives better. Does that make sense? Okay, step 3. So here's the solution. Let's just change how services work. Okay, that's the solution. So I put circa 205. I'd probably go back a little bit further than that, if I'm honest, actually, reflecting. Probably maybe it's 203, 204. It was actually in 2002, I went, imagine this, went from the third sector to the Department of Health. Imagine that journey. That was really easy. Not. And I joined the Valiant People Support Team. And that was, and I joined as the National Advocacy Lead. And that's a bit scary to reflect on that. And I was the Northeast Regional Lead as well. I settled down into a pattern of red then blonde, red then blonde. It was a bit of a cycle. People used to speculate about which it would be, and there was a theory that went around that when my hair was red, I was about to get ill. It's an interesting theory, but anyway, some people had it. And I guess it was a part of that, during that time, and I don't know how many of you are aware of it, but all the work on our current thinking about personalisation started in the Valiant People team. That's kind of where it was born. And it was around that idea of thinking, there's got to be a different way of doing this. There's got to be a way of keeping the money next to the person and helping them think about how they spend it, knowing how much money they've got, about thinking about that jargon word that the Department of Health call universal services, and I just think of as the ordinary stuff that we all expect to use, so that I can go swimming in my swimming bath anytime I want with my kids, and I don't have to go to the special disabled swimming afternoon on a Sunday afternoon. That the idea that we do think about things not getting so bad that we have to throw massive amounts of money in services or take somebody into away places that cost an awful lot of money. and that we actually recognise that people themselves have an awful lot to bring. And that's kind of the essence of what we now think of as personalisation. And a lot of that for me was very much a period of, it's got to be about inclusion, it's got to be about ordinariness, it's got to be about all those things that you said made life worth living. No matter what label I live with, no matter what my impairment is, no matter what's going on in my life, that's what it's got to be about. And that was the first time I think that I was around a bunch of people who started talking about getting a life, not a service. And that really framed it for me. So there was a bit of a kind of dichotomy, a bit of a pull going on for me at this point, because I was National Advocacy Lead. I wrote a toolkit. Some of you might even have seen it. We did a lot of thinking about what advocacy was. We agonised about definitions. That was what exercised us. And I really resonated with what you said about advocacy, your advocate or advisor. That kind of like, that's when we started to unpick some of those discussions about what is this all about. And I moved, whereas I was very purist in my data skills for people, I think that was my kind of real purist time. And I started to kind of challenge that. And I think that some of the things that are summed up, two conversations, one a conversation I had at lunchtime and something that happened to me last week, probably sum this up, is the idea of the role of an advocate and the idea of the purism around standing by somebody and by the decision they want to make. I just spoke to someone at lunchtime who talked about being an advocate for somebody who was in somewhere and was terribly distressed, a woman who's very distressed, young woman, early 20s, and was basically told that, you know, unless your behaviour changes, you're going to be put into the forensic units, you're going to be banged up. And she said, yeah, that's what I want. And the person I was speaking to at lunchtime was brave enough to say, no, you don't. Actually, do you know what will happen there? Do you understand what will happen? Do you know what that's about? And we had that conversation at lunchtime that went, is that advocacy then? Or is it standing by people? Is standing by people and saying that's what she wants to do? She wants to go into the secure unit. She wants to go into that forensic unit. That's what she wants. What's that about? I don't know. I'm just throwing it out there, okay? I'm just saying I don't think it's that straightforward. 2 weeks ago, I don't use the word advocate very often. 2 weeks ago, I was asked by a friend to help him explore with a bunch of people what a service spec, they were putting a tender together for an advocacy service in an unnamed part of the country. And I said I'd go and facilitate a discussion with them about what that spec should look like. This was a bunch of people who use services and some commissioners and some advocates. And we worked together to think about what that spec should look like. And at one point we got into a conversation about the fact that it was really frustrating with the current service how you often would ring to get through to an advocate and you get through to the answer phone. And so one of the things that the place that conversation went to was, I know what we really need out of this is for there to be advocates available 24/7. So any time, day or night, you need to speak to an advocate, you should be able to. And I had a heart-sinking moment, I'm afraid. I had a massive heart-sinking moment. And I think that is absolutely what led me on to the step 4. But there's something about, let's go back to that, all the things that we want in our life. I have a whole bunch of people in my life that help me to make sure I get what I want out of my life. Most of them are people who are there because they love me. I'm very lucky, yeah? Most of the time, they're helping me fight things that I can fight myself. But if I can't fight it myself, they'll be there fighting it alongside me. I have had people say to me, you know you can ring me anytime, day or night. These are people I love, who love me, and I love. And I genuinely was trying to think if I've ever done that, and I don't think I have. Because actually there's something about that resilience has gone, because I know I can, I haven't. But there's enough people who love me there who would come in the middle of the night, and I know they would. And I just worry about the notion that we set up a service that enables somebody to ring somebody who's paid, or even voluntarily, but not just someone who loves me, to be there in the middle of the night. What does that say about what we think about people? And at this point is when I started morphing towards the idea of advocacy as a verb, not a noun, which is really interesting that you said that. So the idea of moving from it being something that we can package and count and might happen on a Thursday afternoon, maybe between the hours of 1 and 5, to something that is about what we do. It's a process, and lots of people do it. Lots of people in our life advocate. So again, a bit controversial. Do nurses sometimes advocate for us? I was at my chiropractor last Thursday, very dodgy back amongst other things, and she was asking me how things were going, and I was talking about new meds and all this kind of stuff, and she said, you know, you don't ever have to worry if they ever, if you ever have any problem, with them saying, they'll section you, we will never let that happen, don't you? My chiropractor. And I was like, isn't that fantastic? I thought, yeah, I don't need an advocate, I've got a chiropractor. Now there's no, and those her words were, we would never let that happen. Now isn't that something about what you guys do? Not letting things happen? So there's something about that, there's different people in my life that do those things for me. Sometimes, and in some situations, I need somebody who has a hat, a badge and a whistle that says advocate. And I'm grateful for those times when you're there. But I also think we need to think really carefully about when we're doing that just that advocacy thing. And that kind of takes me to the last bit. It was only a few years ago that I got to the point where I thought that maybe it's bigger and tougher than that. Because it's not as easy as saying if everything's lovely in the world, then when services and supports work fine, then we won't need any more advocates, will we? And that will happen about next week, yeah? We know that's not how it's going to be. But it's characterised by embracing my curls. A few people have said to me, I haven't seen today, oh, you've got curly hair. Yeah, it's always been curly. I've just had very good straighteners. There's a symbolism to embracing my curls, I think. Two things there. I set up on my own. I escaped from being a civil servant. I'm now a recovering civil servant. And there's something about working for yourself, Kate, isn't there, that makes you think about, people ask you what you do and what you believe in and what you're offering. So you have to kind of rehearse that stuff. So I did a bit of that. And the second really, really important thing that leads to the next bit is my mum. And she'll hate me for putting that picture up, and you mustn't share that picture because she'll kill me. My mum lives with me. So I now have the maddest of all madhouses, okay? My life goes between Alan Ayckbourn on a good day and Mike Lee on a bad day, okay? So there's me, there's my mum who's 86 and has the beginnings of memory loss, and there's my two kids who are both long-term fostered and both live with the label of complex autism. Oh, and there's two mad cats as well. So you can imagine, yeah? So divorce again, very careless. Living in a village in the middle of nowhere. Lots of 50-mile round trips to civilization. I have teenagers, so I do a lot of, trips to buses. Learning from my mum. So long after my partner left, she really helped me reframe things. When my mum came to live with me 7 years ago, I turned into the perfect daughter. She was only just about to be 80 at that point, and I turned into the perfect daughter. I cooked for her, I cleaned for her, I did all the washing, I did everything. There was nothing, she needed to do nothing apart from watch TV. And very quickly, that's what she started doing. And she was driving at that point, but she became to the point where she just watched TV, and I didn't notice. When my partner left, there's me, there's my business, and there's my two bonkers children. And I had to start saying, Mum, I'm in London tomorrow. Would it be all right if you just nipped to Sainsbury's and did the shopping today? Mum, would you mind awfully if you just did the ironing? Any chance you'd get the ironing done? Miracle of miracles, what happened? She did it. How do you think it affected her? Yeah. She suddenly became my mum again. And I was actually mortified. I was really embarrassed because I thought, all my life is spent talking to people about how to help them get a life, and I'd effectively stopped my mum from having one by sorting it all out. And I think one of the most important bits of thinking I do at the moment, and we haven't got time to talk lots about it, is this idea of co-production. Now, please Google this, okay? Because the only thing I'm going to focus on today is the idea of reciprocity. And I think there's a crucial thing in our world, in the advocacy world, that is easy to forget, is that once we stop expecting anything of people, they'll give us nothing. And one of the most recent, most important pieces of learning I've been doing is around in mental health, working with people who tell me a lot, and it resonated with me because I was that woman. I can't do that, I'm not very well. And there's something about starting to expect stuff of people and that it's okay to do that. So for me, that's that idea of going back to the roots, going back to our roots, going back to basics, that actually isn't about self-advocacy. And that's just a jargon word for confidence, competence, self-worth, belief in who I am and what I've got to offer enough to get the life that I want to have. Courage of my convictions. And when that's too hard, having someone alongside me, preferably someone who loves me, to actually be alongside me and give me that courage, preferably give me that courage, or if not, give me that helping hand. And that can be a range of people. But it's that idea of we have done a great job of stopping expecting people to contribute anything. That once you become a poor needy person who needs something, then you've got, there's no way for you to be someone who's got something to offer. And that's what I did to my mum. So, just so that you get to go home vaguely on time, my summing up would be, I think that what I'm saying is try and solve the right problem at the right time, and don't try and solve problems that aren't yours to fix. Use the right tools and expect people to bring some tools of their own. Verbs are more active than nouns. so if change is about an active process, then advocating as a verb is much more powerful than just being that noun of advocacy. And don't let advocacy be part of the problem, or worse, enable service land to justify solving the wrong problem with the wrong solution. We're in danger of making sure that specialist, medium secure units run really effectively. Should we not be approaching medium secure units with the idea that they shouldn't be existing? Again, that's the view of Tricia Nicoll only. And maybe there's something in that change in your hair colour thing, I don't know, who knows. That's me.